Welcome to another fantabulous episode of MiniGrinder Paints. In this episode, I'll be painting Reaper's Aina, the Valkyrie. This paint job is actually a free commission that I gave away on my Facebook page and Google Plus page. That's right, every month I like to give away a free commission paint job on my social media pages, Google Plus and Facebook. So, if you like swell painted miniatures, like this one right here, looking pretty nice, then you may want to head over to my Google Plus or Facebook page, MiniGrinder Studio, and follow it. You supply the miniature, I supply the paint. Pretty good deal. Now let's get on with it. I'll be using Reaper's Master Series paint, pure black, pure white, stone gray, aged bone, tan skin, fair shadow, muddy brown, earth brown, tan leather, red brick, blood red, brilliant blue, and that MSP sample. You know me, I like to start off with the whites of the eyes. I aim for a kind of a 5-to-1 mix of pure white and aged bone. And I load the paint onto a damp brush to promote the flow. Next up, I'll be basing the eye with some forest green. Yes, I know again, I forgot to mention it in the paint lineup. Hey, nobody's perfect. A couple dabs will do ya. You want it to be big enough to basically put a highlight on the inside of that iris also. And for that color, I just used a little bit of my leftover white and mixed it with the forest green. As you can see, the eyes look horrible, but to make them look a lot nicer, just take your base color for your skin and surround the eyes. You see, I find it easier to paint the eyes when there are no eyelids. The base color of the skin is kind of a mix between muddy brown and a little bit of blood red, maybe a 4-to-1 ratio. It's also important to note that the paint is well loaded on a damp brush. I'm just going to use a little bit of leftover paint mix in a little bit more muddy brown and some water to kind of make like a wash, a light wash. And when adding water to paint to thin it out, I never add more water than what my brush can hold. You can really see the benefits of frosting your miniature with that black-white primer combo. It's like instant shading. It's wonderful. I'm going to continue with this technique with all the leathers. For this I'm using some earth brown, again thinned down with some water, and washed onto the surface. And yet again I'm going to be using the same technique for the shirt. For this I'm using brilliant blue. I'm not really concerned with the straps and the arms, as I'm going to come back later and base them a different color. Adding the proper amount of water to your paint to thin it out takes a lot of practice. My general rule is to add a little bit, and then if you need more, add more. I'm just base layering the cape here with some red brick. As you can see, it looks a little thin, but it's straight paint. No water was added. It'll take a couple coats to get that nice thick layer that I'm looking for. And when you're done, just let it dry and come back to it later. Next up is a scale mail. And I do want to do a non-metallic metal here. But I'm going to use the same technique that I used on the leather, except for I'm washing it down with some pure black. Remember, with non-metallic metal, contrast is key. We're going to come back later and touch up the mid-range with some stone gray, and then top it off with some blended pure white. With all the base layers done, it's time to start on the top layers. For the skin tone, I'm using a mix between tan skin and blood red. Kind of a 5-to-1 or 6-to-1 ratio. Just a nip. The paint is moderately loaded on a damp brush. Okay, now I'm going to highlight the skin while I'm at it with some fair shadow. The paint is lightly loaded onto a moist brush. A little bit more than damp. Be a double damp. That'll help me blend that fair shadow color into the top layer. Now don't just slap on your highlight all over the face. You just want to target certain areas like the nose, cheekbones, chin, places like that. I'm going to go back with a moderately loaded detailer with some fair shadow and sort of strengthen those highlights. Nice strong highlights. Loading up the dry brush with some blood red. It is lightly loaded. Notice how I'm moving the brush back and forth perpendicularly to the folds of the cloth. When I dry brush, I typically load the brush lightly because I don't mind doing multiple layers to achieve that flat matte finish. One of the downsides of dry brushing is it has kind of a grainy look to it sometimes. So to fix that, I'm going to go ahead and load up a detailer here with some blood red. I used a moist brush to mix in with the red, so I like the consistency. You really want the paint thin enough to cover up all the defects from the dry brush, but not so thin as not to notice. Using a base layer of muddy brown to distinguish the straps on the arms. Now that I can easily distinguish where the sleeves are, I'm going to go ahead and highlight them. And this is just a mix of brown blue and white. I'm using a damp, maybe a double damp brush to mix the paint with. Just keep on adding layers till you get somewhere you like. It's getting there. Using tanned leather to bring out these borders a little bit more. We'll also define these arm straps with the same color. Kind of a highlighting maneuver, almost a dab and dash. 100% the proper nomenclature. I'm basing these gems with pure white. That'll really brighten the top color. Taking a swath of white, mixing it with a little bit of that blood red. I'm just going to twiddle it on. Each one gets a free dab. I'm just going to stab it with some pure white, and that'll help it with that G-lint, also known as the glint. As you can see, it's very technical. I'm beefing up the mid-range on the iron armor with a dry brush of stone gray. I'm highlighting the armor with some pure white. It's been thinned down with a damp brush. Don't kid yourself after one layer, go back and do it again. But this time do it with a moderately loaded brush of not so thin paint. Try to follow the edges, it'll make the most sense to the eye. Don't forget the scale mail. Just repeat that process of thin layer followed by a hard layer, and all will be good. I didn't really care for the blandness of the padded leather armor. I'm going to switch it up a little bit by turning those leather pads into steel plates. I'll start the process with a light load of thick wash. The objective is to dull the top color and strengthen the bottom layers. Now the mid-range color, stone gray. The paint is lightly loaded on a damp brush. I'm doing kind of a dry brush with it because I want to avoid filling in those little dimples. And we're going to highlight the armor with some pure white that has been thinned down by a moist brush. Each one gets just a light dabble to encourage the shine. Just putting some final touches on the lower portion. I think that looks a lot better than some padded leather armor. Okay, now I'm going to top layer the hair with a dry brushing of that MSP sample color. I think it's just perfect for that natural redhead color. Just going to take some of this leftover tan leather, mix it in with that MSP sample color for a highlight. If you wanted to know the ratios, I honestly couldn't tell you. Sorry, bud. It's just how I paint. Just make sure that your brush is lightly loaded and your dry brushed highlight will look great. One of the great things about this model is that it's a little modular. It comes with either a tower shield or a round shield, and either a javelin or a sword. So it's kind of nice. I like it when they give you a little bit of variety. So I've started with the center. I'm going to base that with the red brick. As you remember, it'll take a couple layers to build up a nice flat matte surface. Then following it up with a nice heavy dry brush of blood red. One layer is not enough. You gotta do a few. That's okay. It just means that you're putting the right amount of paint on the brush. Just going to go ahead and cover up that overflow. Give myself a nice base to work from. As you can visually inspect for yourself, the brush is well loaded. What do you think? Maybe another white line in the center? No. So we're going to do a light wash of pure black. I'm using just a slightly thin pure black. The objective here is to match the armor. Remember, as always, with non-metal metal, high contrast is key. I let that wash dry. I'm going to follow it up with that thinned pure white. Just going to blend in the shine. Dab here, dab there. With a similarly loaded brush, it's going to follow suit here on the edge. You also want to highlight the top edge of the bottom side as well. I'd like the javelin to match the armor, so I'm going to start off with a heavy wash of pure black. An easy way to blend is to go in and add this next color while your wash is still wet. It'll mix right there on the canvas. When I first started painting, this is how I would always blend. Okay, I'm just going to highlight that center edge of the spear with some pure white. Just tap out some of this paint, and then we'll go back in and blend it. For more dynamic lighting, just highlight the one side. There's a lot of details in this very large javelin. I'm just going to do a kind of a dry brushing maneuver all the way down it with some pure white. The paint was lightly mixed with a damp brush. Now I'm going to go ahead and highlight the gloves with some tanned leather. The brush is damp and lightly loaded. So I want to put some realistic snow on the base. This is an easy mix to do, and most people have the stuff lying around. It's an equal part mixture between baking soda, white glue, and white paint. Really, you can use any cheap acrylic. Load up an old brush and kind of dry brush with it. It globs on and it settles nicely. For a freshly fallen snow effect, powder it with some baking soda and then blow away the excess. Don't forget the teeth! For these not so pearly whites, I'm using some aged bone. I'm very happy with how this has turned out. But I don't think we're quite done yet. There's still more that we can do. I'm going to freehand a couple of encircling ravens on the shield. One on the top and one on the bottom. So I asked the commissioner if he had any insights as to a design element for this miniature. His reply was ravens, a very powerful Nordic animal. Odin, the top god in the pantheon, is often depicted with two ravens, his pets Hugin and Munin. They kind of represent memory and thought. And they're kind of like the messengers to Midgard, carrying news back and forth. I honestly don't know which one I'm painting right now, Hugin or Munin. Poor fellow's looking a little scrawny, so I'm going to beef up the back there. Give him more of a classic raven hunch. I'm going to use some blood red for some negative space line work here. And the eye. Nailed it. I'm going to do some line work on the cape. For this I'm using my 5-0 liner. I love this brush. It's amazing how some simple design elements can really just make a miniature pop. This here will wrap up the work. Well, let's take a proper look on Rain Studios Terra tiles. It was very nice. It's what I do. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you guys for watching my show. Every time somebody shares my video, it motivates me to do more. I just want to say that I'm going to continue to make these videos free. I'm trying to make at least one episode of MiniGrinder paints every week. If you want to follow my work, head over to Facebook or Google Plus and search for MiniGrinder Studio. That's where I'll be. If you'd like to commission some work from me, just head over to bigdwarfgames.com/artistcommissions. It's also where I'll be. Once again, I can't thank you enough for watching, liking, and subscribing to my channel. Have a wonderful day.